This episode of The Learning Geeks is called The Persistence of Ignorance. And if you think that's going to get snarky, just wait till you join our guest, Deb Arnold, one of our favorite people in the whole world, on this episode of the Learning Geeks podcast, starting right now. Hey, Deb. Welcome.
Hey,
you are one of our favorite people. You can be snarky. We can all be snarky. I think we're going to be snarky together. We do have to observe, though, that we are one geek short.
Who is missing?
Mr. Jake Gittleson is AWOL today. So, we can really trash talk him, because if he really doesn't like it, he's just going to edit this out. But, we're sending Jake.
Maybe it's the persistence of ignorance that's keeping him away. He wants to remain ignorant on the topic we're talking about.
That could be it.
Ignorance is bliss, some say.
And Bliss is a city in Idaho, and who wants to live in Idaho anyway?
Okay. Have you been to Bliss, Idaho?
I don't even know if there is such a city, but it's something we've always said at our house.
I don't think I've ever been to Idaho, actually. Yeah, have you? It's only one state over for you, Dana.
Oh, I get there all the time. That's where Kristen and Chloe and baby Livy and Sheldon live.
Lovely.
It's amazing. Well, maybe we can get a picture of Livy, and we can post a picture of Livy. We can post a picture of the librarian who's been helping Deb at the Whistler Public Library, and a picture of Jake to remember what he looks like, because he's not here and I forget. We can put that all in the post-show credits.
Excellent.
But hey, you know what, Deb? So we started talking about this episode of the Learning Geeks when you and I were at ATD in New Orleans together, and we had a lovely time. We ate a lot of really good food, and we listened to some good music. And as I recall, we were talking about this in the diner, right? This was the diner. What was it called again? Do you remember the name of the diner?
Camellia Grill, the Camellia Grill.
Yeah. And it was on the other side of the town, but it was worth the Uber ride, because Dana, pecan pie. Imagine they take pecan pie, they cut it out of the tin, and then they put it on the griddle. Warm it up.
Before they put it on the griddle, they ladle some butter.
Right? And then they put the pie on there.
Is it pecan or pecan? Pecan or pecan?
Pecan pie. I always say pecan pie. Pecan pie. My grandma was a pecan pie. Yeah. Anyway, you're missing the best part. They put it on the griddle, warm it up, then they flip it over. They flip it over, like topside on the butter.
Yes.
So the crust is up.
Amazing.
Okay.
The crust is up a little bit.
They heat both sides in butter.
They do.
On the grill, so you get it warm with ice cream on top. It's insane.
It's so good. It's so good. So
awesome.
In this richness of decadence, Deb and I were whinging about how frustrating it is as learning professionals who know that the reason we do the work that we are doing is to help humans adjust their behavior to deliver business results. And yet we still deal with stakeholders and sponsors and people who just don't seem to want to make that connection. And it's really driving us a little bit crazy. And so we're wondering, why does that ignorance persist? I told you that this was going to get snarky and a little whingy. Now, one good thing is, one of my big takeaways from the ATD conference, and I've said it here before, is I do start to see a little bit of a shift in the industry. There are people who are starting to talk about, hey, it's about business results. It's about delivering performance. It's not just about the learning experience, which is encouraging to me. But we have a ways to go. Deb is... we didn't do the official introduction of Deb.
I'll do the drum roll, Bob.
Dana, can you wing it?
Oh,
okay.
I was going to say, I'll do the drum roll. You do the introduction, right?
Do the drum roll. Okay. Great. Deb Arnold, wonderful human being, absolutely brilliant person, a colleague of ours for many years, either officially or unofficially. The magic of Deb is, if you want to get an award for what you do in the learning space, call Deb because she knows how to make those things happen. And when we say that, what we mean is Deb knows how to tell really compelling stories about the learning programs that you have. And the punchline of those stories is usually the business results that we're delivering. What is the impact that this thing has? So she is brilliant at understanding how we get to those stories. And thus, it made sense for us to be having this conversation at the Camellia Grill over pecan pie.
And Bob, I might add, not only does she tell
Mm.
brilliant stories, but she also knows which stories to tell when pulling
Mm-hmm.
together an award, because often there are really interesting stories relating to a project, but they may not be the things that need to be told in order to win awards. So she has lots of expertise and brilliance on both sides of that equation. So we're glad to have you,
Absolutely.
Deb.
We're glad to have you. And at the end of this, we're going to let you give all your contact information. So everybody who right now is going like, oh, I need to call Deb, will call you, but not until they're done listening to our episode.
Guys, thank you so much for having me. First of all, that was really a lovely introduction, and I'm very touched. I do consider myself a learning geek, and now it's official.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. Yes, my background is in marketing communications, and I have an MBA. And about 16 years ago, I stumbled onto this need that there were learning leaders who wanted to do better on awards, wanted to get more recognition, but they lacked a resource, whether that resource was time or familiarity with awards or skills at writing. And before I knew it, I had developed a whole business around really what the recognition trifecta. Three main things you can do if you want to be recognized for excellence: of course, winning awards, also speaking at conferences, and publishing thought leadership. So I'm a consultant, a coach. I also do ghostwriting, and great to be here today. So you might wonder, given that I'm actually not an L&D practitioner, nor have I ever been an L&D practitioner, what right do I have to talk about stakeholder conversations?
Well, none of our stakeholders are either, though. So that's the whole thing.
Well, okay, so my clients have won more than 200 awards at this point and 14 number ones. And so I've heard a lot of stories. I've had a lot of conversations with folks who come to me, a year after their program launched, a year and a half after their program launched. If you work at a certain professional services firm, you may come like before your program has actually launched and want to apply for an award. So I know what doesn't happen in these conversations, because when I ask certain questions, I get blank stares for the answers. Like, what were the KPIs we were trying to drive? Right? What
Yeah.
was the business situation? What was the challenge, the opportunity, the problem that we were trying to solve that was the catalyst for creating this program in the first place? So I've seen clients struggle with measurement, but it's occurred to me recently, I think that we always hold the stakeholders responsible for that. We always feel, well, the stakeholder didn't give me the objectives. So what am I supposed to do? I didn't get the objective. So, but I think that's not necessarily the case. And I want to use an analogy, imperfect as it may be, that I think is still instructive and hopefully memorable. And that is about asking garlic press questions. Now you may
So,
say,
yeah, Deb, why garlic press?
garlic
Why
press?
garlic press? And what do you know about garlic pressing?
What on earth? So back in the day when I was between jobs in my career, I took a job as a holiday sales associate at a store called Sur La Table. It's a kitchenware store, with my favorite store as it happens. Their flagship is in Pike Place Market, which is about a mile down the road from me in Seattle. And one of the things I loved to sell was garlic presses. I don't know why. I just got a kick out of it because, the prices then range from like $7.99 to $35. That's a pretty big spread for, a small kitchen implement. And I loved the conversations that I would have with people in order to figure out what is the garlic press that they need and will ultimately buy, right? So, what's the question I would not ask them? What kind of garlic press do you want?
Yeah.
Because most of the time they're not going to be able to answer me. If they knew, they would have come in and say, "I'm looking for a xylus," or "I
Right.
want the," you want to take them by the hand and ask them very simple, easy questions that they can answer that will give you the information that you need. Because that's what you want to know. You want to know what kind of garlic press do they need. But they probably don't know how to tell you that straight out. So you start with, great, is this for you or is it a gift? If it's a gift, you say, great, tell me about the person you're buying for. How often do they cook? Tell me about your relationship. Or if it's for you, how often do you find yourself using a garlic press? How often do you cook with garlic? And that
How
will
often do
give
you
you the
sleep alone at night?
Or brush your
exactly.
teeth.
Right. There you go.
Exactly. So that's going to give you the information that you need, right? So if someone's like, "Oh, we just, we finally, ours finally broke. We had it for 10 years. We don't use it that often, but we just want to have one around the house." Great. They're going to get the 7.99 Xylus. But if, and these are actual stories, someone said, "We go through garlic presses. We have to replace them all the time because we use so much garlic." Great. I'm going to give them a $35 Rusley garlic press, which I think now is $42. Stainless steel, made in Germany, unbreakable. So I believe that what happens too often is that the L&D person gets into a room with a stakeholder and they ask the equivalent of, "What kind of garlic press would you like?"
Right. Yep.
So I think that there are, all right, so all of this has persuaded me recently that if you want to win an award, the process begins before the first stakeholder conversation. Not even at the first stakeholder conversation, but before the first stakeholder conversation. And there are three things you can do. I'm going to say them now and I'm going to say them again at the end. The first is strengthen the business fundamentals, your business fundamentals. How does your company make money? What are the trends in your industry? Now, a lot of folks already know that, but if you don't, now is the time. Be
So, Deb,
sure,
you're saying
yeah.
as a learning professional, you need to
Mhm.
know the business that you're working for
Yep.
better than you probably do right now.
Absolutely.
Yep.
If you don't already, if you work for a public company, you want to listen to those earnings calls, you want to read the quarterly reports, anything that you can get your hands on, you should be up on the news, you should be reading all the press releases from your company so you know what's going on. The second is do your stakeholder and KPI homework. I want to talk about that a little more in a minute, but that's the second phase of preparation is, who are you going to be meeting with? What do they care about? What's keeping them up at night? And how much can you find out in advance so that you
Hmm.
don't walk into that conversation cold, right? And
Yep.
how to get to the end result. And then the third thing to do is craft your garlic press questions, as I'm going to lovingly call them. Okay, so I would like to share a few stories from my many, many experiences working with folks who come to me at the end of the process and want to apply for an award. There are a few different scenarios. One scenario is there were no defined business goals or objectives. All right. The stakeholder said, "Do X," and didn't say why and didn't give any more information. And the L&D person didn't ask any further questions. They just said, "Okay, you want that done, we'll do it."
Order taking.
Um, mhm,
Hmm.
exactly. Order taking. The second is the goals were defined, but there was no mechanism to capture what actually happened, right? So this was an incredible program, really. Like, it had durable learning, it involved practice. This was a sales training program. They put together the actual cross-functional cohorts that were going to be going and pitching within 3 weeks of the program. They taught them how to use all of the resources that were available to them in order to, research the client and the client's competitor, potential client and their competitors, et cetera. And then the learning program was actually practicing putting together the pitch but putting together an actual pitch, and then they were going to go out and pitch the clients. Amazing. And I
Yep.
asked, so how did they do? These people who went out and pitched,
Oh,
these teams that
right.
you prepared, they went out and pitched the clients. Then what happened? They didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know. Nobody had thought, like, okay, well, let's circle back and see how everybody did so that we know what worked, what didn't work, et cetera. So even when, and these were brilliant L&D people and pretty smart stakeholders too, but there was that missing piece of the puzzle. Now, fortunately, I'm pretty good at figuring out workarounds like, who would know whether or not those sales went well? Oh, the regional sales manager. Great. Could you call up the region? Can you reach out to these folks and ask them
Yeah.
how things went? Oh, yeah, we have a really good relationship with them. Great. So, they did a little qualitative research. They made a couple of phone calls and they found out that people did really well. And the hit rate was, X percent. Of course, they hadn't set a target, which is unfortunate, but okay. Sometimes learning objectives are tied to outcomes that are hard to measure. Sometimes learning objectives could be tied to measurable outcomes, but they weren't. Right. So there was a leadership development program for high potential early talent. They also wanted them to have better business acumen so they could have deeper, richer conversations with their clients that would help them to cross-sell solutions to other
Mm-hmm.
parts of the business. And they did a lot of measurement. It was a beautiful program, a 1-year program, and they did a lot of testing of the business acumen, but they didn't do the follow-up measurement of whether or not that led to any sales, right? Any cross-selling, which was the ultimate goal. So all kinds of things, and I imagine those early conversations, and I wish that I could be, have a little mic in their ear and say, ask them this, ask them that.
A little Cyrano de Bergerac action going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Anyway, so I just said a lot and I want to hear your thoughts.
Well, I'm enjoying being very smug against these LNLD people who do these crazy things. Also knowing that I'm guilty of everything that we just whinged about that people do. I'm guilty of just rolling over and taking orders. I'm guilty of coming up with good business goals that we have and not having a good way to measure it or even thinking about that. I'm guilty of all the above. And I'm trying to change, and you're helping me, Deb. I appreciate that.
I've got a couple of reactions. First of all, I just did a search and it looks like Temu has a garlic press for 72 cents if you're willing to wait about a month.
Yeah.
Good to know. Thank you.
Good luck. Good luck. Temu, not a sponsor of ours.
No,
No.
unfortunately. Seriously, though, one of the things that I do want to draw attention to is the fact that we recently had Bob Mosier on our podcast. And Bob is a guy who pays attention to all of these things we're talking about. He's another one who gets it and figures out how to tie all the pieces together to get from from figuring out what needs to be done all the way to on through performance and measurement. Although they do also, he and Conrad do wrestle with several of the aspects of measurement, but I think they've made some great progress in the industry. I'm curious what Jake thinks. Oh, wait, Jake's not here.
Definitely welcome. So, but Bob, you are sort of the quintessential example of someone who is really, really smart and really experienced, and your stuff. This isn't easy to do.
It's not. It's not. And you know what?
Easy.
Yeah. Actually, I'll tell you a little story, Deb. We were having a meeting yesterday, and there was an icebreaker. It was kind of a deep trust icebreaker question. And that question was, what's something about yourself that you've learned in the last 6 months? And when I was thinking about that, I actually thought back to our conversation, because one of the conversations we had in New Orleans was me confessing to you, I have always been resistant about measurement. It just it makes my brain go on vapor lock. And you kind of probed as to why. And what I realized was I get so hung up with the idea that you're looking to make a shift on a business measure, on a business outcome, something that you can measure. And there are so many other factors other than a learning journey that can affect that, that it's almost impossible to make that tie. So then
Mm,
that's when my undies get in a bundle and I'm just like, it does not compute. I can't do this. But where I'm starting to get to is the idea that, look, first off, we should all agree going into the development of a learning program, any kind of learning program, what are the business outcomes that we're trying to affect? Because we need that information to design a good program, right?
mhm,
So at least we've got that down on paper, and we're moving towards that same goal. And then if we take a combination of, number one, let's see what happens to that business outcome. Does the needle go up? Does the needle go down? And then combine that with what's the best picture that we can paint with the data that we can get of the impact that the learning experience had on the shift of that business metric, then at least we can pull together a good story. We can use all that data to tell a good story. So you might have something where, hey, you've got the best learning program in the world, and it's actually making a really good difference, but the business metric is going down because there's other factors, there's other vectors
mhm,
that are making it, not succeed. If you've got all of that information together, you can tell that story and you can help make decisions on, what do we do next? Do we ramp up the training? Do
mhm.
we keep doing the training the way it is? Or do we keep the training the way it is and then start looking at other things that we might shift to make that business metric go up, which, I think is mostly the
Y-
answer. So these are kind of some of
Bob,
the
is
epiphanies that I've been having in the last couple of weeks.
yeah, a question I've got though is, isn't part of the challenge isolating the idea that training is the thing that has impacted their performance? Because there's always a bunch of other factors, right? And I think, Deb,
Mhm.
you've dealt with that at times too. It
Uh,
seems that that might be part of the
very,
reason why there's persistence.
yeah. Well, so here's the thing: you don't have to take all of the credit to take some of the
Some
credit,
of the credit. Okay. All right.
Right.
right?
Right.
Fair
So,
enough.
I mean, it's pretty, in certain circumstances, you can completely isolate the impact of training, and I've seen it done, but it's can be really tricky.
Hmm.
And there are certainly many situations where it's going to be very, very hard. Look, I here's my challenge to the Learning Geeks podcast. I would love to see a series of maybe 4 episodes or something like that on different aspects of learning measurement. Just dive deep and cover all of this stuff because there's way more than we can talk about today. But I do want to say that. And it links back to what we call the chain of evidence. So, Bob, as you pointed out, it's really essential to know, what are we trying to move the needle on?
Right.
And you get there by asking the garlic press questions, which we'll come back to in a minute, and by doing your homework, which we'll also come back to in a minute. So it starts from the business outcomes, then identify what are the behaviors that are going to drive those outcomes. Working back from that, what's the knowledge and skills that
Yeah.
the people need in order to exhibit those behaviors? And and that's what you build the program based on. And then you've got what you call the chain of evidence. And just very briefly, you can put together a compelling case by looking at, let's say, the Kirkpatrick 4 levels of evaluation. Level 1, if people, it's not a, did they like the instructor, or did they think the room was the right temperature, or was lunch delicious? It's whether people feel that they can use what they learned on the
Hmm.
job, whether they believe they can, whether they would recommend this to somebody else. It doesn't mean they will apply it or recommend, but at least they think that. If you then tested the people, Kirkpatrick level 2, on the information that you gave them, if you gave them proficiency exams especially, then that's another link in the chain of evidence. Like, okay, they think they're going to be able to use it, and they did well on the test. So there was knowledge and skill gain. Level 3, behavior change. All right, so let's say
Hmm.
it's a sales program and you're training them on the challenger sales model, and you have witnessed, you've got senior salespeople going to the same meetings and seeing them using the challenger model and reporting that, 90% of the people who took the course are using the challenger framework instead of whatever framework they were using previously. And then number four, level four, of course, is the business impact. So going back to the sales
Hmm.
example, and I know, yes, I know sales is easier than everything else. I know. But if the people who took the course had higher sales than the people who didn't take the course, and you've got that is another link
It's
in the
telling you
chain of
something,
evidence,
right?
right? It's telling you
Yeah.
something. It's a
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
compelling argument. Can you prove it? Well, like I said, you need to, have an analytics expert who can isolate, seasonality and tenure and, any whatever other factors you would want to isolate. But you can build a chain of evidence. So, is it easy to do? No, it's not easy to do. But if you don't try, you will fail 100% of the time,
Right.
right? Having productive stakeholder conversations are not easy. But if you don't try to get the information, you will fail 100% of the time. And then when you get to me, now I'm really good at working backwards and helping ask the questions that could have or should have been asked in that original stakeholder conversation and tracing our way back and figuring out how we can analyze it after the fact. And very often it works. But it would be a lot better if it were set up from the beginning, because then you're strengthening that relationship with the stakeholder, right? You are involving them, you're persuading them, you're showing them that it actually can be done.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to go back to the second of the three steps. The first, strengthen business fundamentals. The second, do
Yep.
your stakeholder homework. And the
That's
third,
good because I was just going to ask you.
okay,
You teased us that you were going to come back to
I did.
the stakeholder homework. So yeah.
Yeah, so here it is. So, Bob, just like you've been hearing interesting things at conferences, I've also been hearing interesting things at conferences. And I heard two different people at two different conferences say basically the same thing, which really kind of blew my mind, which was make stuff up. Basically, they didn't use those exact words. They didn't use those exact words, but
Hmm.
one of them, who's a CLO of a healthcare company, said, and it's a private company, but she looks up anything she can find that's available about revenue and margin and profit, anything she can find, and brings that to the conversation. I see Division X launched a new product. Is this related to that? How can, and she
Mm.
finds a way to ask questions that are linked to, you know, information about the business in such a way that A, it sparks the thinking of the stakeholder, B, it builds her credibility with the stakeholder, C, right, she comes into the conversation educated and ready to have a conversation. The other guy I also thought this was really amazing. He will build a straw man, a straw person, as it
Yeah.
were, right? He'll come in and say, so, and maybe this is the second conversation. I took the information that you gave me and I put together a straw man. And would these be the KPIs? I just took a shot at
Hmm.
it, but this it gives us a starting point. I
Hmm.
wrote down some of the KPIs and how much we might want to shift them. Does this seem like it could be a starting point for us? Because if you ask the stakeholder, right, what are the
Yeah.
KPIs that you want to move and by how much, they may not know. They may not know,
Right.
and you're going to have to help them. It's not your fault, but it is your problem if you want to do work that delivers results and if you want to be accountable to your stakeholders for delivering measurable outcomes. Okay, so those are things that you can
Yeah.
do, right? Like, isn't that
Yeah.
what?
It's great stuff.
Wow, what a
Yeah.
different approach. um, and also really fun, like figuring out, like solving a mystery. And that goes back to the business acumen, right? Your business foundations. You got to have the background knowledge in order to know what questions to ask and even to put a straw man together.
Right. So for
Okay.
love of the force, don't go into the stakeholder meetings and be like, what are the learning objectives you're trying to
Please
achieve?
no.
That will cause
Nope.
glazed over eyes. And, you're basically saying, I need you to do my work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. By
Exactly.
having those conversations and then helping them, well, let's sit down and figure out together if that's what's needed, like the things that are going to make an impact on your business. Then you can also
Mm-hmm.
have conversations that might be like, hey, we came up with these 3 or 4. These 2, we think that, a shift in behavior is going to address those. These 2 over here might not have anything to do with a learning program.
Mm-hmm.
That might be a systemic thing. That might be a leadership challenge. And
100%.
let's have that conversation, because we have friends in other parts of the business that can help address all these. Now you're adding value. Now you're building your table, to go back to
Mm-hmm.
Keith Keating's illustration from a few weeks ago.
100%. And Bob, that's a great point. The solution may not be training at all,
Right.
which is really one of the reasons why you want to not ask what kind of training do you want, like what kind of garlic press do you want?
Yeah.
You need to find out what's going on. Is this for you or is it a gift? So you want to
Right.
ask questions.
Yep.
Here's my garlic press questions. You want to ask simple questions that give you the information that you need. They need to be at least relatively easy to answer. The question should put the person at ease.
Yeah.
It should build trust in your ability to guide them. And one rule of sales, that they should talk 75% of the time, and you as the seller should talk 25% of the time.
Sure. Yeah.
So
Do you have examples, Deb, of good garlic press questions you would ask?
Well,
Can you come up with a
Bob, I
hypothetical?
do have a few of those, but I think it's going to depend on the stakeholder. And I was
Yeah, of
wondering,
course. Right,
actually, if
right, right,
either
right.
of you
Yeah, yeah.
have those questions. I'm going to turn the question back to you, because I know both of you have had stakeholder conversations. So I have a few here. All right, I'll give you a few to start. So how are things going? How's
Yeah.
business? I noticed in the blah, blah, blah that such and such has been happening. How's that impacting your KPIs? How are your people feeling? What's keeping you up at night?
That's the one I go
General,
to.
really,
Yeah.
right?
I was
Softball
just about to come in
questions.
with what's keeping you up at night. That's one of
Yeah,
my favorites.
right.
Again, not that I'm good at this. I've never been good at it. I'm learning. But yeah, but that's it. Like, just getting in and having a good, solid, like, person to person conversation,
Hmm.
and I think a tip a tip that I have learned and been trying to have to grow in myself is my ability to be more curious. I mean, just going in and having a conversation where you're curious,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so if they say something that maybe you're a little confused on, dig in and ask, well, what is it with that? Like, what does that actually mean, and how does that connect to this? I think that goes a long way.
One of the questions that I used to like, or the trains of thought, was h- how do you envision your business in a year?
Mm.
And then have that discussion for a little bit, and then say, now, what will enable that and what will keep that from happening? That starts to get you some
Mm.
insight on strategy and aspiration. And so I always found those fun discussions.
I've
I
used the
love it.
magic wand question too. If you could wave a magic wand
Mm.
and change one behavior in your organization, what would it be?
Surprised
Or
it
am I
wasn't a
even?
lightsaber question. If you could use a lightsaber to get rid of one thing, what would it be?
Well, then, uh, waving a magic wand is a little bit more of a carrot. The lightsaber is a little more of a stick, but yeah, it's the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
vibe.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah. So again, questions they can answer that you're sure they can answer. So don't the things you don't want to ask. What does success look like? What does success look like is the same as what kind of garlic press do you need?
Mm,
What if they don't know? And they give you
mm,
an answer like smile sheets. If people liked it and people complete it, then that will be success. Then what do you do? Say, oh,
right.
actually, no, that's not right. It's really hard to come back from something like that. So be
Yeah.
careful to not answer, not ask
No, ask.
questions
Yeah.
that they can give you the wrong answer to. And that's going to put you in a really tough position that you're not sure how you're going to get out of. Because if it's hard to get information from a stakeholder, boy,
Yeah.
it's much harder to tell a stakeholder that they're wrong,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. Yeah. Well, Deb, this has been an amazing start. We will take into advisement your suggestion to do a longer series about this. I'm all about it. We'll talk about that, even though we don't like when people tell us what to do. But other than that,
Suggested with
I think
love.
I know, and it's a wonderful suggestion. I think that we should keep diving into this. By the way, for people keeping score, we did track down Jake. He's on PTO. He's painting his office right now. He completely forgot that we had a recording session. Apologies to you on behalf of Jake, Deb, and apologies to all of our listeners who are, being deprived of Jake's wisdom because he's painting his office.
Offices, they're not going to paint themselves. That's all I'm going to say.
They are.
I was really looking forward to meeting Jake, who I never met when Accenture was my client for many years. And so I was looking forward to it. And actually, Jake, I was going to quote you because I love what you said on one of the podcasts, which is in terms of measurement and figuring out what it is that you're trying to measure, like what do you want to see happen and what goes into that?
Yeah.
Something like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That kind of gets at, right? That's a question they can't get wrong. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully
sure.
they can't get
So
that
we should ask Jake what type of a brush he needs, right? No.
No.
What are you trying to do with that brush?
Yeah. What color office do you want to have? Deb,
Yeah.
how do people get a hold of you on the interwebs?
You can find me at Deb at debarnoldinc.com. That's Inc with a K. On my website, which I'm redoing. So maybe wait a month or you can find me on LinkedIn, of course, LinkedIn/Deb Arnold. I got it first. So that's all you need to find me. And love to continue the conversation on measurement or anything else related to recognition. Such a pleasure
And seriously,
being
friends,
here, guys.
yeah, and we can't recommend Deb enough. So seriously, give her a call and also get on her mailing list because then you get her amazing holiday videos, which we'll just leave that as a tease. It's worth getting on Deb's mailing list just to get the
just
holiday
for
videos.
the videos. Yep.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I do.
I really think Deb I think you should be doing 2 of those videos a year just to keep things rolling.
A mid-year for sure.
That's my suggestion.
I'd be behind that.
I appreciate that, Dana.
All right, everybody. Thank you for being here. Listeners, thanks for joining in. Jake, thanks for doing whatever it was you were doing, painting. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Learning Geeks podcast whenever we get to it. In the meantime, see you later. Bye.
Take care. Thanks.
Thank you.